Welcome to the Prof Talk Pod, brought to you by the Engaged Professor. Every 2 weeks, join us as we talk about tips and tricks to help you connect with your students, engage with industry, and stay up to date on all the teaching trends. We'll give you actionable strategies that will help improve your teaching today. Thank you for being here. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Prof Talk Pod. For those of you who haven't joined before, my name is Becky Aiken, and I have been recording and producing the podcast for coming up on 2 years now. I'm excited that you're here, and I'm excited to talk today about kind of something that just has been going through my mind over the past month or so. For those of you who read my LinkedIn newsletter, you may have seen this story come up in the April issue just a few weeks ago. For those of you who don't know, I publish a monthly newsletter on LinkedIn called Prof Talk. You're welcome to follow me on LinkedIn. My name there is Becky Aiken, or you can look for linkedin.com/Rebecca Aiken to follow that newsletter. I also will post the podcast there from time to time as well. But I've been writing this newsletter for just over 2 years now and wrote last month about something that happened in class. So I had an interesting experience in one of my in class activities in the Introduction to Professional Performance course. Students are asked to do an ethical debate. And for the last few semesters, I have chosen to have them set up kind of a debate about if they were going to start a podcast about what it was like to be a KU student. And as part of that podcast, they decided they were going to potentially use AI to write the drafts for the podcast. So to write their script, they were going to put in a prompt, have it generate the script, and then just read that script as the podcast that then they would produce and promote as being their own thoughts and perspectives. And the debate really is one side is required to say that there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. We can use AI to do that. And the other group is required to argue the other side that that's completely wrong and unethical. And I assign them sides. They're required to stick to their given belief system for the first part of the debate. Now, I've been using this similar debate for quite a few years, and not surprisingly, we get through the first 10 minutes or so, and students are kind of like, okay, can we talk about the gray area? There's a lot of nuance here. It really isn't as simple as I put in a prompt, it gives me a script, I read the script, I publish it as a podcast. And they're right. It's not that simple because there are a lot of ways to integrate the use of AI into producing content. It's meant to be dichotomous, right? It's meant to be a hard line because that gets us interested in talking through the different structures that we might use to make a decision here. But ultimately, we come down to talking about the gray area and talking about where students' lines are. At the end of the discussion, I ask students to tell me, what do they think? What do they really think? Not what they were required to think, but what do they really think? Is this okay or not okay, and why? And we kind of debrief that conversation a little bit. Now, if you want to know more about what that debrief looked like, you certainly can read the newsletter on LinkedIn. I don't want to repeat all of that content here. But what I do want to say is that as part of that conversation, we talked about what students think is the right time to use AI in their lives and in their schoolwork. And it got me reflecting again on my own use of AI in my life and in my work and on this personal experiences and things that I use it for as well. And many of you know that I have been pretty engaged with trying to understand, trying to explore AI since November of 2022. I noticed very quickly while I was grading that last month of that semester that something different was happening. The way that students were submitting work, it was just different. And I got onto ChatGPT and I started playing with the tool and exploring its outputs and looking at what it gave me for my own assignment prompts, and very quickly became quite engaged in what tools like ChatGPT could do. And I've kind of evolved my thinking over the last almost 4 years through use and experimentation and thinking about how AI can be useful both in my work as a teacher, my work as a content creator, my work as a consultant, and even my personal life and the way that I organize my family and the recipes that we use and how I do research about what technical products I might want to buy. And because of that, my perspectives have really evolved quite a lot over the past 3.5 years. And so has my personal evaluation of what I choose to use and when I choose to use it. And it's really caused me to reflect on when does my voice, my personal voice showing up in what I'm putting into the world truly matter? And when does the effort that I'm putting in, the hard part, the what Robert Rose would call valuable friction, when is that necessary? When is that important? When is that useful? And I've been really reflecting on that. And I used to think, maybe even just 6 months ago, certainly a year ago, that I could put my use of AI into buckets related to the output. So it's great for email writing. I'll use it to write all my emails. Oh, I don't want to use it in my research at all. I don't want to use it to write the Prof Talk newsletter. And I've updated that thinking a little bit, especially after hearing my students talk about the nuance in their decision making. But even as I've had conversations with colleagues, both in my academic work and in my consulting work, and clients who we've been walking through in their training how they could use AI in their work and how they are using it and where they are okay and not okay with using it. And I've thought about that. I've really updated how I will and when I will choose to use AI across all of these areas of my life. And that perspective has really come down to thinking very intentionally about what matters the most. If it matters if the words come from me, if writing them helps me think through or process, if it means something to someone else that I put in the effort that's coming directly from my perspective, if the idea is being said in my words, the way that I talk, the way that I connect matter, and if effort is important, then I'm going to do the work. Then I'm going to do the writing or the creating or the developing. That's how I am deciding what bucket my work goes into. Is it going into the bucket of I really need to show up in this space as authentically as possible? Or is it a general response to a request from yet another publisher to write a book, right? What is the thing? What is the important part? And where do I matter in the process? And let me give you a couple of examples of how this has actually changed the way that I might do my work and how I've seen it work through the work of my colleagues. Now, there are definitely times where I get emails that would be much faster for me to just go into Microsoft Copilot or ChatGPT and say, "Hey, I need to respond to a colleague about this activity that this committee that we are engaged in. Write me an email." And it can write me a pretty generic email and I'll go in and edit it. But sometimes, let's say a student emails me and I think, okay, I need to respond to this student. How should I respond to the student? It would be easy for me to copy the student's email to me into Copilot. KU has a license for Copilot and say, generate an email for a response to this student based on these three pillars. But for me, I will choose to respond to that student with my own words because writing out what I want to say often helps me think through how I want to respond. It's especially true at this time of the year when students are kind of coming at us from a lot of different directions with different reasons for why maybe they didn't submit things on time or they need another chance or additional considerations. And what I find really useful for me in those moments is to actually write a response to students, save it in a draft, go back to it a couple hours later, and see how my thinking has updated or evolved and revise the email. Now, I know that takes longer, but there are some things that I think matter for our processing and matter for us to respond with intention and to respond with authenticity. And that is one of them. And so email is no longer a bucket where, oh, I can just respond to those with AI. It is now a bucket where some emails I can and others I will choose not to. Here's another example. As I think about the opportunities to increase my engagement in the Sport Marketing Association, I'm thinking about writing a nomination letter for myself to run for a position. And it would be really easy for me to just go into ChatGPT. ChatGPT and I have been together for almost 4 years now. It knows me quite well. It knows the way I write. It knows my experiences. It knows what I do in my spare time and how I view myself as a professional and a professor. It knows a lot about me. I could very quickly give it a prompt to generate a letter of nomination for me to submit to myself, for myself, for me to submit for myself to be seen by the membership to consider whether or not they should vote for me for this position. But instead, I'm going to look at a blank piece of paper and I'm going to write from me why I want them to consider me for that position because I think it matters that those words are 100% my own. Now, I might dictate some of it. I likely will. I like to, as you might have noticed, talk. And so I might dictate it directly in, but the words are still going to be directly from me because I think that that matters. I don't want it to be kind of broad, flowy language that says very little with a lot of words. I want it to be specific and heartfelt and meaningful. And at the end of the day, it might not be as good as someone who can prompt generative AI to write them this glowing, beautiful recommendation reason letter for why they should earn the position with the organization. But at the end of the day, I want it to be mine. And I want to know that I put the authenticity into it, that I put the work, that I put the effort into it, because that's how I would show up in that position. So for me, that's really, really important. A year ago, I think I might have felt differently. I think a year ago, I might have been like, oh, that's just another thing to do. It's just a formality. Let's just get it done. I'm really trying to think a lot more intentionally about use of AI in my own work because that's what we're modeling for our students. And these are the things we need to talk about with our students. Be transparent about where AI is present in the work that we do and where it is not. When I started writing the newsletter 2 years ago, I was writing it all blank piece of paper from my brain. About a year ago, I was most commonly dictating it on my drive and then asking ChatGPT to rearrange the words in a way that was made sense and was well organized. Most recently, I'm back to blank page staring, writing out my thoughts, writing them out in sometimes messy and ugly ways because I think that that matters. I think that that connection matters. I think the whole reason I started doing it was the opportunity to share those thoughts and those perspectives and try to build conversation around them. That is something that is still uniquely ours. And I don't want it to get distilled down into the most common denominator of people's experiences and then regurgitated as if it were my words. Same thing with the podcast. Our scripts are, we don't write full scripts. We tend to write outlines. Those are written from my brain. They are not written using generative AI. We use generative AI to help edit it. So I use a program called Descript where I can look at the transcript and I can cut out of the transcript things that need to be cut out of the podcast, use it to add captions directly into the podcast. And if we have to add anything else, we use Descript to do that. I use it to help write the description for YouTube so that it can have keywords in it because that to me isn't the most important part. The most important part is the podcast, the audio recording itself. I think about this in the way that I build assignments for students. I will use ChatGPT to help me build better assignments for students. I will often give it old assignments and say, hey, this is what I was doing before. Here are the 10 reasons why it's not working. Here are some ideas I have for ways it could be better. Tell me what you think. What holes do you see? What problems do you see? And which of these ideas do you think will be most useful? To me, that has made all of my assignments better. My explanations are in more depth. I can be intentional about what I include or don't include in a description when I use generative AI in that way. I'm not using generative AI to grade any student work. I'm not using any tools that are available to grade papers. I don't do exams. I had exams in one class this year that I graded by hand, but in every other class, I don't use exams because I think it's important for me to grade student work, to see what they're thinking, to see where the gaps are, what I need to cover in class again, and to have the opportunity to view whether they're thinking about things in detail and depth, or maybe whether they are outsourcing some of that thought to AI so that we can talk about when and why and where it might be helpful to do that. I learned from my students that they are thinking more intentionally than I realized, and maybe not all, but certainly the ones that I had in my class. They're thinking about which classes it makes sense for, not in my major classes, not in classes where I believe the value of what is being taught is important and I need to know it. That really makes me continually reflect on how do those ideas, the things that I really need to know and understand and be able to do, how do they push me away from AI and into my own struggle and my own process and my own experience of learning? That's not something I was doing a year and a half ago, certainly not 2 years ago. Not that I would say I don't ever believe I was leaning too hard into AI, but I wasn't looking intentionally at every single choice that I was making and realizing where I matter in the process. And to be honest, I think that's something we all have to do. And what matters to you and what matters to me may be slightly different based on the things that we get energy from. I know a lot of people who use writing to think and to process. I know other people who writing is painful for them. One way doesn't make it necessarily better than the other, but I think it's important to realize where your effort communicates something about care and the value that you put in something, and where your effort means something, your words mean something in the way that they come from you. I've been grading student reflections this week. I do lots of reflections in my classes at the end of the semester. And one of the comments I'm saying over and over and over again is I want to know from you in your words, however messy, however ugly, however disorganized your words are and your thoughts are. I want yours. I don't want the distilled version that AI will give you when you put your messy notes into it and you ask it to make it sound good. I want your words. I believe now and always have believed that word choice matters, that the words we use say something about what we mean and they have deep meaning. I might choose to use a specific phrase to describe something, and I do that for a reason. And that's why I want the students' words and the students' thoughts because there's more to see there than just broad generalization sound good that I tend to get when students put in their ideas and then ask AI to make it, quote, sound better. Sometimes I think the mess is valuable, and that's something that many of us need to lean into as we learn how to use these tools to support and improve and grow and develop and build, while also realizing the very human part of what we do. Now, this isn't really the point of this podcast, but something that we'll likely cover. I've got a lot of students who are very concerned about the jobs that they will be able to get. Opportunities for entry level work are diminishing in a lot of fields, certainly in the marketing space. And I've got students who are incredibly worried about what the future of work looks like. And to be honest, I am most days as well. When I think about the things I want AI to be able to do, like go through the 60,000 emails in my email inbox and determine which are promotional emails that can be deleted and which I need to review, that's what I needed to do, versus the stuff that I want to do, like write and interact with students, and engage and teach, and come up with fun examples of ways that we can explore different topics within marketing and branding and our business building selves. That's the things I want to do, not the things I want AI to do. And so as we think about that, it's important that we continue to wrestle with where we might fit in that space and where it fits in our work and what that signals about the value that there is in using AI. All of that to say, I still have some hard lines. I mentioned grading. Grading is a no-go for me. It's been a no-go for me from day one. It might not be a no-go for you. That's fine, but it is for me. And in my research, it's a no-go. We just had abstracts due for Sport Marketing Association conference. Would have been easier to get started on that with a draft in Gemini or Claude, but I am still a no go in my research work. I do all of that writing, all of that ideation from my brain. And I might at some point, I haven't had a chance, given my new professor of the practice role, to really dig into a new research topic in a while. In terms of doing the research, doing the work, doing the writing, for me right now, that's a no go. I don't know how that evolves in academia. I don't know how that will be a year from now. I don't know what that means for the work we do as researchers. I don't know what any of that means. But it's something that we all should be thinking about and thinking intentionally about when we use AI as a support for what we're doing. It's something that for me is continually a personal journey of figuring out where AI fits within my own work and how I communicate that with students and how I help them also wrestle with these same topics. There are no hard and fast rules. I would love to hear your stories of how you're using AI in your teaching or in your work, how it's helping you be more efficient or think more deeply or improve outcomes for your student or yourself. You can email me at Becky at theengagedprofessor.com. You can also comment on this on YouTube. Thank you so much for spending time with me every other Thursday. I have been looking for a way to close the show for almost 2 years and have tried a couple different things and didn't really love any of them. And I think I'm going to start closing with what I close my student newsletters with at KU in the professional performance program. So until next time, be curious, be creative, and just be you.